And I think that gives an idea too about how you can handle some of the criticism that's coming your way is even just proactively sharing something that you've read. Oh, I read this the other day and it really gave me a little bit of insight about, why his brain works the way it does. If you're interested in reading it, here's the link. So not even necessarily in response to a piece of criticism that came your way, but just proactively as you learn things and you find out information, sharing that with the people that are in your child's life that might really benefit from knowing it as well. And then they'll understand a little bit more where you're coming from, why you're making the decisions for your family that you are.
We are the Childhood Collective, and we have helped thousands of overwhelmed parents find joy and confidence in raising their child with ADHD. I'm Katie, a speech-language pathologist.
And I'm Lori.
And I'm Mallory, and we're both child psychologists. We combine the science of ADHD with the compassion of moms and bring you practical tools you can start using today.
So hit subscribe and let's help your family shine with ADHD.
So let's talk about something that is rarely discussed for ADHD parents. Let's talk about the criticism that so many ADHD parents find themselves getting.
Yes, it's really hard.
And it seems like there are even different kinds of criticism.
Yes. So, of course, we have like direct criticism, right? Those rude comments, things like, I wouldn't do it that way, or he just needs more discipline. And I feel like for me, these are almost easier in a way to brush off because it's just so over the top and inappropriate. So it's easy to be like, okay, that was just you being rude.
Yeah. And then there's the people, especially parents that aren't raising kids with ADHD, who want to give you all the advice.
Yes.
Have you tried cutting out sugar? Have you removed all food dyes from your child's diet? Did you hear about that video game that can cure your child's ADHD? And those kind of comments can leave you feeling like you're not doing enough. Maybe you haven't done enough research and maybe this is a valid approach, or you have done your research and you know it's not valid and it's totally outlandish. And it can leave you questioning whether you really even know your child well. They're suggesting all these things and maybe you do need to look into that. Maybe it would help. So it leaves you feeling unsure, uneasy. It's challenging to get all the unsolicited advice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or sometimes people might share a personal story and it's maybe coming from a critical place. Like, well, with my kids, when they start arguing, I tell them and I get upset and they know I mean business. But my immediate reaction is either defensiveness and I start to get angry at them, or I'm just, if I don't know them that well, I'm probably just quietly irritated.
Quietly irritated until the next person you talk to.
And then I blow up at them.
Yes.
Right.
So for me, I try to remind myself that most of the time, I try to tell myself that this is coming from a good place and not to let it bother me. But the truth is, this kind of criticism and advice, it can be so overwhelming. And I think this is especially true for ADHD parents because I think that we spend a lot of time questioning ourselves and the things that we know, because sometimes things just don't go the way we expect them to go. And so you're already sort of in this place of, am I missing something? Am I doing everything I can? And so getting that feedback makes it feel like you have to really defend your choices. And that can just be really difficult and really frustrating.
Yep. Yeah. So today we want to talk about some ideas for how to handle this criticism, this unwanted, unsolicited advice that's probably coming your way. So I'm curious, how do you ladies handle getting this kind of feedback from other people?
I don't handle it well. I get pretty irritated, but one of the things that I kind of tell parents a lot of the time is to really educate yourself about ADHD. ADHD is one of the most misunderstood diagnoses and childhood diagnoses that I talked with families about. And the reason being is it's an invisible diagnosis. You can't necessarily see it like you do a physical disability. If your child's in a wheelchair, you understand, hey, I need to accommodate them with a ramp and they can't go downstairs or things like that. But when it comes to behavior, we interpret that as it's the parent's fault.
I think the other thing that's so confusing is the name ADHD.
Yes.
I'm not a proponent that we need to go out and like reclassify all these names, but I think it is misleading because we talk about attention deficit hyperactivity.
Yeah.
We get a lot of parents that say, oh, I think it's just ADD, which obviously that was a diagnosis before, but it's no longer. All kids would fall under that ADHD, and there's different types. But I think it implies a really specific set of symptoms, like the child that's just running around the classroom, can't sit still, not looking, not paying attention, where we know that does encompass a certain group of kids, but the name even in itself is just confusing for people, and they think they know what it means, but they really have no idea.
Right. So there's families who are coming through our door who say, my kid can't have ADHD because they're not climbing on furniture. They don't have all that extra energy. They're not hyperactive. So it can't be ADHD. That's their thought. And of course, that's the thought of other people too, when they're trying to give their advice. And the other thing we see, and another kind of misnomer with ADHD, is that we'll have parents also come in and say, it can't be ADHD because they can focus really well on their video games. There's times where they can focus really well. So it's not ADHD. So it leaves everyone confused. And I think it leads a lot of people who aren't informed to have an opinion about whether a certain child has ADHD or not, because they don't fit that attention deficit hyperactivity label.
Yeah. And this can happen with friends. This can happen with family members. It can also happen at school. I was at an IEP meeting over the past year. I go to lots of IEP meetings. And I remember this particular child had inattentive symptoms. So it was not hyperactive, impulsive. And so the teacher was kind of like, well, I don't really see the impulsivity, because as an IEP team, we're trying to determine, like, is their ADHD affecting them at school? Do they need services? And the teacher was like, well, he sits still. He's not getting up out of his chair a lot. He's not blurting out like a typical kid with ADHD. But what I do see with him is he just can't get started on his work. He's often like looking around the classroom. He's not finishing his work in the classroom. And that teacher, again, and even team members within the school kind of didn't recognize that those things, organization challenges, were symptoms of ADHD, because they didn't understand that. So even with people who are professionals, even counselors or things like that, if they don't have a background in that, you might be faced with them sort of not understanding.
And in that situation, the parents have to know about ADHD. Like, the onus really falls on the parent to be educated and to feel confident to say, no, this is part of that symptomology, and to be able to say, like, this is what we're seeing, and this is their ADHD affecting them. So what are some of the tips that we would give parents, like, for educating themselves about ADHD? Obviously, listening to our podcast.
Good job, everyone, for listening to us today.
That's right.
And there are also other podcasts out there where, again, if you're kind of like not a book person, like I don't really love books and I do better with listening to things. Podcasts are a great way to educate yourself. And especially if you have a short attention span and you want information and snippets, that's a great way to learn. Finding books. And again, if you're not somebody who reads books, listening to books, audiobooks. I want to say books on tape, because I'm like that old that I used to have cassette tapes.
Okay,
I remember my husband, when we dated in high school, and he made me like a cassette tape that was like, like love you songs and whatever. But yes.
Did it have Faith Hill on it? No. Okay.
No, he was not into Faith
We had
Hill.
different audio tapes then, I guess.
Yes. Anyway, don't get tapes because those don't exist anymore, but audiobooks are a great thing. We love Russell Barkley. It has lots of really great science-based information for parents out there, and some good videos on YouTube as well that you can check out. If you're on social media, we are on Instagram, and part of our reasoning for being on Instagram, and people will make fun of us, including our husbands, for the stupid videos that we make, and being silly and humorous. But again, we realize that parents need like they need humor in their life. They need lightheartedness. You are dealing with heavy, heavy stuff every day, and heavy challenges with criticism from other people, and the behaviors that you're dealing with on a regular basis. It is hard stuff. And we want to have some humor there, but also finding accounts that you know are going to give you science-based information. There's so many accounts out there that can just provide information. I had a family reach out in our messages a little while ago and sent this video, and it was from a psychiatrist who's really well known. And the video, sadly, to me, had like many thousands of likes on it. And it was really a video about saying that parents were their stress was causing their child's ADHD. And again, this is not based on the science and the research that we have on ADHD, that ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder, that it starts in childhood. It is not caused by parents. And there's not research to really support that. Yet this parent was kind of coming and saying, I don't think I believe this, but I don't know. Did my stress cause my child's ADHD? And is like, taking that criticism to heart. So that's where, like, when you hear those criticisms from other people, it's nice to have a base of science and knowledge around ADHD to, one, be able to speak against that, but also to not believe it, and believe those criticisms that are coming out there about what's going on in your parenting.
It's so challenging. It's so tricky. Even like, I know I follow accounts about picky eating because my kids tend to be really selective in their food. And, people come on there and they say, these are my credentials and I have all this, this background knowledge. And it is hard to know sometimes which accounts are evidence-based and to kind of figure out like which ones to follow. So anyone that's citing research, that's generally a positive. And I think that if something really just doesn't feel right to you, like the example where that mom was saying, oh my gosh, he has all these millions of followers, but he's saying this, and I don't think that's
he's a
right.
medical doctor.
And has an MD. Yeah. So then it's like kind of recognizing that and having that kind of spidey sense, I think, to know like this just doesn't fit and this is not connecting for me, and not in a denial type of way, but just in a being realistic and really listening through a filter, because there are accounts out there that are really big that don't necessarily follow the evidence, and that's unfortunate because parents get confused.
Yeah. And I think also just, I don't know, I was scrolling through, being on Instagram and working on Instagram, I'm scrolling through feeds and I'm just feeling, to be honest, like really sad about my own parenting. And I don't know if other people feel that way, but it's like, do this and don't do this. And I'm looking at these examples and I'm like, oh gosh, like I just yelled at my kids this morning. Last night I was getting so frustrated because I had given like 20 reminders to my daughter before bedtime. And she had this like sad face. And I'm like, I'm just a horrible parent. Like, and I know that.
And you're a child psychologist.
I am a child psychologist.
Tons of training.
And and I just, again, like if you're feeling that way, then get rid of those like accounts that are making you feel that way. And maybe we're one of them. I hope not. But I do think that there's sometimes when we have so much information out there to educate ourselves, it's like almost too much. And it can make us feel like bad about what's going on in our lives. And we really, I remember last night I said to my daughter, I'm like, really sorry, and I apologized for how I acted with her. And I said, I'm just really like upset at myself. And she said, Mom, I was listening to something today. And my teacher in art class said that you shouldn't be upset at yourself and sad at yourself. And you have to forgive yourself. And I was like, oh, that is such great advice, honey. But again, like if you're feeling that way from what people are saying, or even our own voices in our head as parents, like what we're saying to ourselves, forgive yourself a little bit, because we're all there on a regular basis, on a daily basis, are going through these things. So we also have an online course, just to let you guys know. I won't get into that, but it's all about really educating parents on what ADHD is and the treatments that we know are backed by science and that are effective, to really cut through all of the noise that's out there, that maybe isn't necessarily based on science if you're doing a Google search. So that's also available. Over the past year, my oldest has really struggled with anxiety, especially at night. As soon as it was time for sleep, she'd be crying for me to stay and worrying about all the things. I was talking to another therapist about our bedtime battles, and she said the Zenimal, a screen free meditation device, had been a game changer for her daughter with ADHD and anxiety. I immediately purchased the Zenimal and can confidently say it was the best tool to help my daughter get better sleep. She was able to fall asleep an hour earlier using it.
Yes, it's actually really helped my kids to be able to calm their busy bodies at night.
What we love about the Zenimal is that it combines two of our favorite bedtime recommendations, using a relaxation strategy and removing screens from the bedroom.
The Zenimal is an adorable screen-free turtle with 9 guided meditations your kids can choose from. And our absolute favorite part of the Zenimal is that every meditation ends with the most important message: you're a good kid.
To grab your own Zenimal and get your child and yourself some better sleep, head to zenimals.com and use our code TCC for a discount. You can also find the link in the show notes.
And another strategy that I like to think of when I'm thinking about managing criticism and advice is it's okay to set a boundary with your response. And I think that that can be really, really challenging. I'm speaking from personal experience. When somebody's giving you feedback or advice, it could be ADHD related or not. It's especially as like a kind, sort of gentle person, it's really hard to kind of set that boundary. And I think this is going to look different for every one of us. So we're not here to give you a script, although a script is sometimes helpful. But I think the strategy here would be to develop your own script and recognize that that's going to look different depending on who you're talking to. So for me personally, I'm more direct with people I know better. I think some people might feel the opposite, and they might be more direct with strangers and have a harder time with like family and friends. For me, that it just tends to work the other way, especially my family. I can be pretty honest with them. So I have sort of like 2 different responses. For strangers, I'll typically just smile and nod. Thank you so much. Yep. And then like straight up avoidance. Like I am leaving. One time I was in a massage and someone asked what I do, and I no longer tell them because I always get, oh, ADHD. I heard that that's just overdiagnosed now. And then I'm like, and I can't.
And who wants to talk to someone
Right.
in a massage?
Yeah, that's double offensive. Yeah. So I will just smile and nod. Yep. And then I'll just get right back to my very relaxing massage. But with people that I know better, I am learning to be more direct. And right before we hit record, I was telling Lori and Mal a story that happened to me personally. And I have a really good friend who has a really specific diet that she follows with her family, and it's been really successful for them. And so she would constantly kind of tell me about these different recipes, and this would be so great. I think this would really help. There's quite a lot of ADHD in my family, and she knows that. And so her supportive response was to tell me, why I should change all of our diets over. And just to give a little backstory, my husband is from Iowa, where meat and milk are very fundamental to his way of being. And I was dairy free before I met him, and then never again since then have I been dairy free, because it's just really important to him. So the idea of following a really strict vegan type diet where we cut everything out, and it was overwhelming to me. And I felt like there was a lot of opportunities where I could have said oh, thank you so much. We're going to go a different route, but I didn't. And I just kept saying, oh, that's such a great idea. I love that. Yeah. Tell me more. Again, I'm being kind in my own mind, but it ended up kind of coming to a head where I just got one day really, really frustrated. And I just had a little bit of a breakdown about it, because I was like, you know what? This is too much feedback. And I feel overwhelmed, and I feel kind of judged. And it really made it so hard in that friendship for a long time. Now it's back to what I would call a restored place. But there's kind of this boundary now where we don't talk about diets, and we don't talk about what we eat, because I think that it just got to a point where I hadn't set that boundary. So I encourage you all to learn from my mistake. And if you feel, especially with a closer friend or family member, they're sort of crossing that line, don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. And you can do it in a kind way. My favorite go-to is thank you so much. I'm going to look into it and I will let you know if I want more information. And that seems to be kind of like, I'm acknowledging them just like we do with our kids. I acknowledge your feelings. You don't want to go to bed, but here's the boundary. Like, we're getting in our bed and I will come and check on you so that you feel supported. But really taking that baton and saying like, I'm going to hold it. You don't get to keep kind of instilling what you perceive to be your wisdom into my life. And it's honestly in a much healthier place now. And we have played around with different diets in our family. And I'm not here to talk about like the science of that. And for those of you that are like, oh, I want to do a special diet, or I'm already doing a special diet, that's totally fine. And that is not the point. The point was more to say that for our family, it was just too much for me and I needed to kind of set that boundary.
Yeah. And I think with family, sometimes it has to be even more direct.
Yes.
Where it has to be more of a like, we're shutting things down. Like, I appreciate your feedback, but we're not doing that. We're going in it. We're doing this. And I hear what you're saying, but we're not doing that.
Right.
So sometimes, and again, you're going to feel more comfortable doing that with like someone who is closer to you. But figuring out what those boundaries are. And if those comments continue, really having a clear conversation and then setting up even more boundaries if that's needed.
And if we need to come to a place with that family member where we just say, you know what, we just can't talk about this anymore.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's hard and that's scary, but we're here to tell you that that is okay. Your goal is to keep you and your family safe on an emotional level as well as physically. And so that's really important.
And offering, you know, again, we have a whole blog post on myths and facts about ADHD and resources that you can give to your family members. So if they're open to that, you can say, hey, you know, I know this really isn't necessarily, you know, true based on the science that's out there. And I'd love to give you more resources and help, you know, if you're interested in learning more about ADHD, and you can give them some information if they're open to that. So that's another way of like, if you have family members, especially if you have like a parent or an aunt or an uncle that's like watching your kids and they really need to understand that too, because they're actually doing, you know, behavior management and things like that on a regular basis with them. It is really important to educate them more on what ADHD is. So
yeah, we get messages all the time from families who are looking for like a specific blog post or a book or even, you know, something specific that they can direct a family member to for them to understand ADHD in their child on the deeper level that they want them to really understand their family and their child. And our blog has tons of great posts to kind of help dive deeper. And I think that gives an idea too about how you can handle some of the criticism that's coming your way is even just proactively sharing something that you've read. Oh, I read this the other day and it really gave me a little bit of insight about, you know, why his brain works the way it does. If you're interested in reading it, here's the link. So not even necessarily in response to a piece of criticism that came your way, but just proactively as you learn things and you find out information, sharing that with the people that are in your child's life that might really benefit from knowing it as well. And then they'll understand a little bit more where you're coming from, why you're making the decisions for your family that you are.
I think that's so important because I think part of it is in this conversation, we're talking about how to react in those situations once that criticism or even perceived criticism can happen. But I love that proactive strategy because, like, for example, we stayed at my brother and sister-in-law's house this past summer. We went back to Iowa, the home of the dairy and meat, and we were there for a week, and we actually stayed at their house, which is a long time to stay with two young kids. And I know that before we went, I reached out and I was like, hey, you know what? My sister-in-law is great. She's super organized. She sends me this really long itinerary, like 5 o'clock, we're getting dinner, 7 o'clock, we're getting ice cream, 8 o'clock is fireworks. And I was like, whoa. I loved all the ideas, but I was like, immediately got on the phone and I said, hey, this is a lot. So what I'm going to say is, you guys, this plan is perfect. Please disseminate this to all 20 family members. And I will be their point person for the kids. If they're tired, if they're stressed, if they just need to go run off some energy at the park, I'm just going to pull them out so it doesn't affect the bigger picture. And she is great. Like, she doesn't have kids, but she was super supportive and was like, yeah, absolutely. And then throughout the trip, we were almost like allies. Like, she would kind of be like, hey, are they doing okay? Like, do they need food? And it was great. And so by me just taking that one really scary kind of step to be like, this isn't my sister, right? This is my sister-in-law. So I'm like, hey, this is so great, but here's my concern. And she was wonderful. So I feel like, Mallory, you're always proactive about things. And I love that, because I think that proactive piece is just, it's a really nice way to have some wins there. So strategy number 2, set that boundary, feel comfortable in knowing what's safe for your family. And that is completely okay.
Yeah. And I think a final strategy here for dealing with the criticism that's almost a preventative strategy in a way is just surrounding yourself with people who get it.
Yes.
Surround yourself with people who leave you feeling energized and happy and not criticized, not judged. Find those friends, find that family that gets it. And, one of the most popular things we ever posted on Instagram was this silly reel about finding when your kid gets invited on a play date and that other parent really gets your child. And man, that just really resonated with people, how finding that friend who understands your child is golden. But on the same breath, a lot of people commented on that reel kind of I'm still waiting for that person.
I don't have that person.
I'm still waiting for that person. I want that person. And we wish we could literally connect all of you, figure out where everyone lives, triangulate you, connect you so you can get that support. But one of the most important things is that social support. And I'm really passionate about social support myself. It was my area of interest in graduate school, what I did research on, and particularly as a way to buffer maternal depression. And what we found is that social support is critical in kind of helping moms that are parenting kids with neurodevelopmental disabilities in preventing or alleviating some of those depressive symptoms. And when you find those people and you spend your time with them, and again, you can share about your child without feeling judged. And when they share back, when they share back their struggles too, then you feel like you're not alone in it. And this is a safe place to kind of share what you're going through, get advice, get solicited advice, advice that you're looking for. It's so imperative. And it's really hard with ADHD. Finding those people who get it. So
how do you find those people who get it? If you're a mom who's listening or a dad that's listening and you're like, ugh, I want that person, where do I find them?
Yeah. So connecting with parents, maybe there's a local Facebook group. A lot of parents have found local Facebook groups, particularly about parenting a child with ADHD or maybe a neurodivergent child.
We have a couple we're in Arizona, so I know I'm in one that's Arizona specific. So they're definitely out there.
Yeah. So getting connected in Facebook groups, local Facebook groups, seeing if there's a CHAD group in your area specific for parents and adults with ADHD, connecting with other parents through that.
That's CHADD, right?
Yep.
Chad.org.
We'll put it in the show notes.
We'll put it in the show notes that you can easily find that website. But that's children and adults with ADHD.
And we've gone and we've done talks at our local CHAD here in the Scottsdale area. I don't know if they're still doing it. COVID kind of messed things up for a while. But definitely check that out and see if you can find groups there.
Yeah, we saw connections kind of being made in the audience with families with shared experiences. If your child is going to therapy or maybe some kind of social support group, connecting with the parents that also have kids as a part of that group is another great way to connect with parents. Other ideas?
Yeah, I think that one is big. I remember I used to lead executive functioning groups for kids age 6 to 10 in my old job. And the parents, I would take the boys back and we would do our thing, build a volcano and all the different fun activities. But the parents loved it because they would just sit there and bond. And so maybe other activities like karate or things that your child would thrive in, there's going to be other kids with ADHD in that same setting. And so that's a great way to get connected. And it's super scary as a parent, putting yourself out there. But I think the more that you're willing to share, about your experience, that can really open the doors to connecting on a deeper level and not just talking about the weather and stuff, which is so easy to fall into.
Or even talking to your child's teacher and being like, who's a kid that they really connect with?
Yes.
And they get along well with. And maybe it is another child that has kind of similar challenges, maybe not, but maybe feeling that out with your child's teacher and seeing if that's like the parent might be a good person to connect with. Again, I'm kind of a socially anxious person. Maybe sometime I'll talk about that journey for me, but I don't really like to initiate things with other parents. And I know that that's like really hard. Because for many people, you're introverts and like reaching out to do that is hard. But socially, for your kids, like giving them those opportunities, or even for you, it's going to be like climb that mountain. And it might be hard at first to put yourself out there and do that because you're risking rejection or the critical comments if they don't get along with you or whatever. But sometimes you have to do that to really make those connections, and it's worth it a lot of times.
Definitely. So strategy number 3 is finding people who get it, people who are walking alongside you in your journey. And that can be a slow process. So in no means are we trying to say, oh, this is so simple.
No.
But these are some tools that you can use to try to build up that community for yourself and your family. So I think our key takeaway today is it is okay for people to misunderstand your journey. You don't owe them an explanation. And it's up to you how much of an explanation you want to give. But when you can really start to let go of their opinions and their ideas, it really makes it easier for you to make the decisions that work the best for your family and for your child. And we are here to support you as you do that. Thanks for listening to Shining with ADHD by your hosts, Lori, Katie, and Mallory of the Childhood Collective. If you enjoyed this episode, please like this video and hit subscribe so you can be the first to know when a new episode airs.
If you are looking for links and resources mentioned in this episode, you can always find those in the show notes. See you next time.